Hey everyone, welcome to Almost Cancelled. I am Peter and I'm going to be talking about The Handmaid's Tale, Season 3, Episode 12. It is called Sacrifice. So full spoilers for the episodes, as always. So first thing you'll notice is that I'm on my own, there's no Connor. That is because Connor has been sick this week and we didn't want to delay the episode review any longer, didn't want to fall too far behind. So I'm here on my own to talk about this episode. And what a big episode it is. Some big beats in this one. Really big few scenes that really stick out as being kind of pivotal in the season as a whole. It feels like a lot of the season's been building to a few of these. And we start the episode with June. She's got the gun and she's kind of like essentially just playing with it and putting the clip in and out and kind of pointing it around and kind of toying with the idea that she is ready to start, being this person. She's ready to start just outright fighting for her life and killing people. And obviously there's an irony to that because she did kill someone last episode. And funnily enough, she kills someone again this episode. We actually have a 2-episode kill streak now for June. So we'll find out in the finale if it becomes a hat trick, if we get this streak gets to keep going. But she is asked downstairs to help with the Marthas, and finds out that the plane thing's been arranged, that the guys agreed to do it, and she takes the tea and whatnot into the room with Lawrence and the other commanders, and they're talking about the fact that there's a crisis. They want to take action, maybe launch an attack, whatever, because there's 2 commanders missing, and they know that Waterford has been taken, and they suspect that Winslow has done the same, although we know different, of course. But yeah, they're kind of panicking, and Lawrence might be getting his clearance back because they're kind of running out of high level commanders that they want to give power to, and so on. And she didn't quite get to hear the whole story during this first part of the scene, but after they leave, and she asks what's going on, she finds out that Fred and Serena have been taken into custody in Canada, and they're being tried for war crimes. Or at least obviously I suspected last episode that it was only going to be Fred, which does turn out to be the case, but at least from their perspective, they think both will be. And June's reaction to this, I think Mossy's acting during this scene is really fantastic. The way she's kind of holding back, just bursting into like a smile and tears of joy and laughter is really good. She's kind of holding it in the entire time, and it's really well done. So, but then he asks, okay, what about the plane? And she's like, oh, it's set for 1 week today. And he's like, okay, great. And he has this great line as he's leaving the scene where he's like, because one of the other things that he tells her, of course, is that they believe, as I said, that Winslow has went missing. They don't think that someone's murdered him. And because of that, he walks out the scene and says, hey, we're about to save 52 kids. Serena and Fred have been captured by Canadians, and you got away with murder. All in all, not a bad morning. So yeah, she ends up having a good happy cry on one of the couches. She's elated, and you do feel kind of happy for her. It feels like we're getting this happy ending, which for me in Handmaid's Tale means that something bad is going to happen very soon, and it does. It is certainly a bad thing, although it's definitely a slightly different twist to a bad thing than I was expecting later in this episode with June, who, of course, very, very soon after this, we have a scene where she escorts Mrs. Lawrence into the sitting room where Winslow's wife and Mrs. Putnam are sitting there, and it's basically just kind of a little meet and greet where they're talking about her missing husband, and they're praying for him to come home, and so on and so on. And what really plays in this scene, though, is this scene got really scary very quickly, because Eleanor starts to say things that are very suspicious. When Mrs. Winslow starts to talk about, oh, what if he never comes back? I have all these kids. They won't let me keep them. They won't let me be a single mother. That's not how Gilead works. She's scared, and that's when Eleanor shouts out, "Oh, we can take them with us. We can save them." And of course, Lawrence kind of plays it off as like, yes, they'll be welcome here. Mi casa, su casa, and but every single line she says, and they're trying their best. Like, he's trying his best to cover for it and make it sound like it's okay, make it sound like she's just a little bit out of it, but what she's saying is not, escaping from Gilead treason or anything like that. And June's glances across to him, like, absolutely mortifying. Like, I got so much suspense out of this scene, and you feel bad for Eleanor because Eleanor's a very likable character and she means well, but she's clearly a risk, and that is something that plays into the rest of the episode. We have another scene where June has to like stop her from leaving the house because she's insisting on going down the street to someone else's house to say that she can take their kids out of Gilead, and she obviously can't do this, and June has to like drag her away from the door. Eleanor at several points says she's going to go back to the school, she's going to try and save all the children, and June has to essentially pin her against the wall, kind of forcefully, and make it very clear that you cannot do this, and gets very stern with her. And I think it's interesting, this dynamic in this scene, because Lawrence is standing there. He does say that's enough, and he does but he doesn't step in and pull her away. He understands that what's happening with his wife is very dangerous, and as much as he doesn't want June roughing her up or anything like that, he very much he's a lot more hands off in the context of this scene than I would ever imagined him being, especially like back in the start of the season when June first moved in. You would have never expected him to be as relaxed in this scene. Relaxed is not the right word, but he definitely holds back more than I would have thought. So no, I mean, the tensions are high, and I was really feeling it, especially in the scene with the other wives. Like, when they were sitting there and she's saying these things, like, holy crap, is she going to out them? Is she going to, like, get them all killed? And it's funny because we get to the other big scene with June, because it really is, like, 4 or 5 scenes with June that are really big in this episode. I mean, there is a scene, actually, I should mention, before we get to the next big one, there was a scene in the supermarket, after she got the good news about the Waterfords. She goes to the supermarket and she's talking to Alma, and then runs into Rita, who's back in town. And this is a really sweet scene, and I think what's really neat about this episode is that it knows that it's going to hit you with a gut punch, and it's going to make you kind of dislike June later on. So it gives you all these happy kind of endings for her, and it gives you this really sweet interaction with Rita, where Rita, like, they kind of bond over the news about the Waterfords, and like they're kind of joking about it. And then Rita reveals she knows about the plan for the kids and she wants to help. And she's like, this was your idea. When did you become such a boss? And it feels really genuine. And they even have this moment where they kind of sneakily hold hands. I wonder if I can read into the imagery a little bit in this scene, because they're talking, like, over the counter where potatoes are in the supermarket. But there's like a top row above this counter that's just got apples lined up. And I wonder if there is some intentional imagery here with the Garden of Eden and apples, and the idea that June is about to take something she's not supposed to. I don't really have much further depth into that thought. I really noticed the apples in this scene that were kind of in a row between them. It felt very prominent in the frame, and I don't think it was an accident. I feel like that was a very intentional set dressing choice. So, but the other big scene, of course, is that June goes to give Eleanor her lunch, and she comes into the room and finds her to be overdosed on pills. She finds a bottle of pills that's been emptied, essentially, and she won't wake up. And so here's the funny thing, right? So all season we have been, or not all season, but we've been kind of predicting recently that maybe June will. Not June, sorry. We've been predicting that maybe Lawrence will die at the end of the season, and he will kind of have like a redemptive sacrifice that will get his wife out. We never predicted that it would actually be Eleanor who died. Now, he still may die, of course, so he may still have that moment, but we didn't expect Eleanor to die. And the other funny thing about this scene, not that it's a funny scene in and of itself, but the funny thing, from a meta level, is that way back at the start of the season, they made a Breaking Bad reference, and we kind of joked a little bit about that, and we talked about how, okay, like, I get what they're saying here about her kind of taking power this season and why that kind of relates to Walter White's character journey. And we said, but I don't necessarily expect her to become as unlikable or as villainous as Walter White did. And what's funny is that this scene kind of puts her in that place to a point. She's still more sympathetic than Walter White because she's been driven to this by the world around her, and we sympathize why she's become this. but she does something thoroughly unlikable in this scene. And the funny part about it is that it's a scene from Breaking Bad. This is literally a scene from Breaking Bad. And as soon as she found her on the bed and she stops to make the choice to not save her, because she's going to do it, she's trying to wake her up. She's like, Eleanor, wake up, wake up. And she's going to the door and she just stops, she freezes. And you can see it going through her head. The acting here is really good. You can see it in Mossy's head, what she's thinking. She's thinking, Eleanor is the danger. She could ruin everything, and this is an easy way out. If I let her die, our plan is safer, and she's no longer going to be a liability. And what makes this truly hurt, beyond just what she's doing, is that Eleanor, we like Eleanor, generally speaking, as an audience, because she's actually been a very sympathetic character who cares about people and doesn't like Gilead, doesn't want to be in Gilead. And on top of that, her and June have kind of had a bit of a bond. Like Eleanor, I think it might have even been this episode where she says, "You're always so good to me," as June's helping her. She has genuinely been helping her throughout the season, and they do have this connection. So for June to talk, because it's one thing, because I don't want to spoil the scene in Breaking Bad, but it's one thing for Walter to make the choice that he does in that with the person he makes that choice with, who he's not as close to or connected with. This is someone who is maybe a bit more personally connected to June in the context of this show, and that makes it sting. It makes it sting in a way where she's not just making this choice to let someone die. She's making this choice for someone she knows is a good person and someone that she likes and has a bond with, and that makes it hurt a lot more. And I think this scene is very well handled in terms of its execution. Because June doesn't leave immediately. She kind of like goes to other parts of the room and kind of thinks it over again. Like she thinks about it multiple times. She's kind of like pacing around and stops in various locations, and then ultimately makes the choice to take the dinner tray, sit it outside the door like she's supposed to do. That was always the original order: is you're supposed to leave the tray outside, and June's kind of overstepped that over time, and she goes back to her own room and waits. I mean, we get this time lapse where we see the daylight come out. So it wasn't lunch; it was probably dinner, but it's the same, the same difference. And she gets up. She hears the screams from one of the Marthas finding her, and yeah, she let Eleanor die, and it's kind of heartbreaking. And it's funny because I think there's a critique to be had here that it is just the same scene from Breaking Bad. Like, and I don't know how intentional that is. I don't know if they are legitimately riffing off of that, or if it's just. It's hard to believe it's a coincidence. It really is, because it is so similar. So I would critique it maybe for that, and that maybe takes me out the moment a little bit, because it is so similar to another show's big scene that it had at a very, very similar point in the show, I think. No, it was maybe in the season 2. It was maybe earlier, but I think the execution of the scene, and I think the choice that June is making contextually makes a lot of sense, and all the pieces in place for her to make that choice and make it feel like not a betrayal of the character. It's a turn for the character that's dark and makes us like her less. She is thoroughly unlikable in the final scenes of this episode, but it does present us with this choice that makes sense. It's a dark choice, it's a choice that's not pleasant, but we understand why she's making it. And the execution, I think, is pretty strong. So it's a shame Connor's not here for this one, because I feel like he'd have thoughts on this. But I do think the execution is solid, even if the fact that it is just a scene from Breaking Bad does make me pause for a second and go, this is Breaking Bad. This is a scene from Breaking Bad. So yeah, but that aside, the execution is really, really, really well done. And we kind of cut ahead, and there's the sort of the service in the house. They're preparing the food, and June, after talking to the Marthas, has this one-on-one with Lawrence, who is distraught. We find out, because one of the things that happens throughout the episode is that they actually want to close the borders, which would mean that the cargo plane that comes in and out wouldn't be coming. And June's like, you have to keep the border open. Here we find out from Lawrence that they have agreed to keep it open because it's hard to argue with someone who's mourning, even for them, as he puts it. And he is very distraught, and he blames himself. He's like, I sent her to her room and I never went to check on her. And June doesn't admit to what she did, of course, but does jump in with, hey, don't do that to yourself. I could have went in the room. I could have checked on her. And it's a real sting for for her character there in that moment, where she's essentially poking at the very thing that she actually did. She's poking at the truth to try and make him feel. She can't tell him the actual truth because he's not going to react well to that naturally. He's going to. The plan is gone. He might try and kill her right there on the spot if he finds that out. But her having to deal with this again, the acting is great. When he walks out after this conversation, she's left standing there, like she kind of she has to fight back the tears again. There is genuine guilt. That is the one thing for her here that works in terms of us still not hating her completely, is that she does have guilt about this. This was not an easy choice. And the other thing that makes this, I think, work in the context of this season, this choice that she made, is that the very start of this season, the first couple of episodes, it was all about her making tough choices to win this fight. It was about her, sacrificing. It was Lawrence himself who said, no, you have to pick like 6 of these people to save, and the rest are going to the colonies. You can't have them all. You have to make that tough choice. And this is an example of her making a tough choice to try and win the fight here at the end of the season. So I think in that sense, it works really well. And I think the performance is great as she has to fight back her guilt, her tears, as she's talking to him. All of this stuff is really good. And I do like, for the most part, the actual funeral scene, which is the final scene of the episode. You've got Aunt Lydia there. You've got all the other wives. You got some commanders there, and June's the only handmaid, and she's in black, which I'd forgotten. I'd forgotten they wore black at funerals. I genuinely had forgotten that. And then so that was like a nice thing, a visual reminder in the end of this episode. And when everyone leaves, and June's supposed to leave as well, she says to Aunt Lydia, "May I be excused?" And Lydia understands, says, "Yes, you may, spend more time at the grave." And she goes up to Lawrence and says, "Would you like to be alone?" And when he doesn't say anything, she stands by his side and brings her hands out front and clasps them just like he has. In this kind of, sign of equality, sign of mutual grieving. And they share this look. And the music here is really good as well, which I loved. The emotion is playing throughout. And I think the performance from both actors here as they're looking at each other, there's one long shot of each face sort of looking back at each other with tears in their eyes, and it plays really well. It almost feels like in that moment they're saying, no, we still have to do this for her honor, to get the kids out. For a brief second, I thought he might have been like suspecting something in his eyes. I'm not convinced that was the case, though. I mean, people might disagree. People might think, no, he is suspecting that she did something wrong, that she's in some way responsible, but I'm not sure why he wouldn't necessarily. But he looks back at the grave, and June looks down as well. And again, the acting's here phenomenal. The one complaint I have to make about this funeral scene at the end is the very final moment, the very final shot, because I kind of hate it. I hate that we get this creepy close-up of June's eyes, and it looks like she's smiling. We don't see her mouth, of course, but it looks like she's doing an evil smile. And, I remember Connor having problems with the evil smile back at the end of episode 3 or 4, whatever that was, earlier this season. Maybe no, I think it was later, actually. I think it was when they got all the muffins. I want to say. No, maybe it was earlier. I can't remember. But you remember this scene. There was a scene earlier on in the kitchen where the camera came in and she did this evil smile. And it was a final shot of an episode. This felt like they were doing a close-up version of that on just her eyes. And we were getting the music kind of turned evil, and we got this evil glare from her, and that's where the episode ended. And I have to say, I don't like this final moment. I don't think the episode needs it. This idea that she is being an evil mastermind with all this. Like, I like that she made the choice, and that she went through with this. She made the difficult choice, and she's becoming someone different, which is obviously something that's talked about in the other subplot, which we'll talk about. But I do think this is overplaying it. I think this is just like the angel wings behind her in the episode in Washington. It's just one of those over-the-top moments that I think just takes me out of the episode and just feels like the director's going, "Hey, look at what we can do. Look at this dramatic moment," as opposed to it feeling natural for the scene. And I think that final shot sucks, and and everything that goes with it, the music that goes with it sucks as well. Like all of it, all of that final 10 seconds or whatever it is, sucks. So So I hate to have one big downer here. Then, and I do think again, there's some nitpicks to be had. I think the scene being so similar to Breaking Bad's a problem, but it's handled so well. It makes so much sense for the characters that, for the most part, it comes out on top. Where I'm kind of just into the what the characters are going through and the drama of it. So the other plot, the other main plot of this episode is of course Serena and Fred. And as me and Connor both predicted last week, she made a deal and handed him over, which she reveals to him in this, because he's like, I'm going to give them whatever they want. I'll make a deal so that you don't have to be in prison. Like he's being as selfless as we know Fred to be, or could ever be, I suppose. But she reveals, she just has this simple line where she says, "You just do what's ever right for you. Don't you worry. You don't have to worry about me." And it becomes clear in this moment, as they're sort of close and embracing, that she has made a deal and that she will not be treated the way he is, that she is going to have freedom. And there's a really great subtle thing here where his hand turns from a caress on the side of her neck to a strangle. And you honestly don't know that. I mean, obviously I expected guards to rush in if he did try and kill her, but it felt like he might. And he says things like, I pity any child that has you for a mother. It's always about what you want. He lashes out because of what she's done, and he's in shock. So it's a really powerful scene, and I think there's a lot of stuff with this Fred and Serena stuff in this episode where you kind of get some catharsis for how they're treated, not to each other necessarily, but by other people. Because of course Luke and Moira come by to this holding facility, and I say holding facility because the rooms are actually quite nice. Like it doesn't look like a jail cell; it looks like a hotel room, and they they're not happy to be there, but they're going through all the security, and there's this irony of them having to be, the Waterfords having to be protected from anyone else visiting them, so they have to be protected from Moira and Luke. And as me and Connor did suggest, we have this idea where Serena's allowed visits with Nicole, not full weekends as we guessed. It was just 1 hour a week, supervised with a social worker, and we get a meeting between Moira and Serena, and there's a lot of little moments here that are just really, really good. Serena almost putting her hair up again before they come in, and then realizing she can let it down. Saying "blessed day" to the social worker, and then realizing she doesn't have to say that and saying hello. Just little things like that are really good. And obviously there's a real dark tinge. There's a scene later on where she's given pizza and a stack of newspapers and some articles to read, and it's like, why does she get this freedom? And obviously she's given them Waterford, that's why, but in the sense of karma, why does she deserve to have this freedom when there's so many people still suffering because of her, in part because of her. And we know how awful she is, but there is some moments of yes, and this, and it's Moira saying, because Serena doesn't know who she is. Serena's like, "Hello, pleased to meet you," and Moira, without missing a beat, is like, "I'm June's friend, and I don't care what you've done or why you're here. It doesn't change the fact that you held her down so that your husband could rape her." And Mark, the American who's been dealing with Serena, kind of steps in and says that's not called for. He tries to kind of calm the tensions and take Moira out, but Moira does get a few more licks in before she leaves. She makes it clear that Fred raped her too at the whorehouse at Jezebel's, which Serena presumably did not know about. Makes that very clear. Makes it clear that she is not Nicole's mother, that it's June's child. And all these little, and then calls her a gender traitor as she leaves the room, and makes it very clear that you will never be considered a friend. You will never be considered welcome. That this is something we do because we've been told to do it, and because the government insists upon it. We are never going to accept you here as one of us, essentially, as one of Canada's people. I mean, I don't know how famous these people are. I don't know if people recognize Serena on the street and treat her like shit, or if it's only going to be the people who are closely related to the story who'll know and always treat her like shit. But that was the vibe that Moira was giving. So it's a really fantastic scene to see Serena just dragged down a peg or two. And then there's another moment from the social worker afterwards where Serena says to the baby, the baby's crying, Nicole's crying, and the social worker's trying to make her feel better. So, it's just, you're a stranger to her right now. It's just, she'll get used to you. That's fine. Don't worry about it. But then Serena says, Mummy's here. It's Mummy, Nicole. And the social worker says, you can't use that word. You can't use terms like that. It'll confuse her. You're not allowed to refer to yourself as her mother. It's just not on. And it's just this harsh reality for her that she's not even getting to be the mother that she wanted to be. That she's betrays a strong word, because she's been having doubts for a while, but she's turned on her husband and done, to the point where she even says to Mark comes in and says, you don't have to worry about him anymore. You don't have to care about him. And he's my husband. She still cares. And it's a really interesting dynamic in that sense. Even though he's probably never really going to want to, really care about her. I mean, he does to a point, I'm sure, and maybe he'll calm down. Maybe they'll meet again and have more visits and stuff. But they probably will, because I imagine there'll be some scenes to mine out of that potential. But yeah, it really slap across the face, harsh reality slap repeatedly during this scene. Even the clock, there's a timer. As soon as she's in the room with Nicole, the clock starts ticking, 24 style. Dun, 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 dun. They should have almost had that come up on the screen for a laugh. I'm kidding, but so, and likewise, Luke asks to see Fred, and it's Fred's choice to let him in or not. And Fred says, "Yeah, let him in. Let's have a chat." And Luke comes in with this folder, this journal that he's kept of stuff. I mean, it's hard we don't get to see it exactly. Maybe stuff that he knows about Fred, maybe stuff that he knows about Gilead. It's hard to say. But Luke comes in with the intentions of wanting to have a serious conversation and say, I grew up like you, a man of faith, but you destroy lives and I don't. And I'm happy you're going to have to live in here and knowing your wife betrayed you all this time. You're going to have to live with that. And Fred turns it around on him and says, what about your wife? You believe she'll come back to you. Maybe she will, but Gilead's changed her. I've changed her. And it's this petty little power play. He just wants to prove that he's more powerful in the scene, and that's all this is. This is the closest he can get to measuring his dick with him, and he wants to do it. He wants to rub it in, because that's all he has now. Because he knows he's probably not going back home. He's not going back to Gilead. So this is and we've talked in the past on this show about the motivation for the men that do what they do in Gilead, and to an extent, obviously by extension the real world, is this idea of power, this idea of being in power and wanting to stay in power. That's why the rich are desperate to stay the richest and don't want everyone else to have any sense of equality, because they want to feel that they're still the most powerful. That's boiling it down to the simplest possible thing, but that is at its root kind of what we've been talking about a lot in this show since the very start. And I think this is him scraping for one last little bit of feeling of power. He gets to get this reaction out of Luke. He evokes this reaction, and obviously the guard has to stay in the room, and then he drags Luke away. It's a really, again, even though he does obviously get Luke dragged out, and it feels like from Fred's point of view he has won a little bit, it feels so good for Luke to punch him. That punch has been coming for a while, and it felt good. It felt so good. So, no, I would go as far as to say this is a great episode, with one major problem at the very end, the very final shot I hate, and some nitpicks as to it feeling a little bit Breaking Bad. And for that one big scene, that one big decision, even though I think the decision makes a lot of sense for the show and the characters. And as far as the direction goes, I think it was mostly well directed and executed throughout the episode. My complaint would obviously be the last scene, the last shot even that I mentioned. I'd also argue that maybe the opening with June and the gun was maybe a little overdone, but not like a huge deal. Like nothing compared to the ending, nothing compared to the wings, the angel wings and all that stuff. But just, yeah, so I do genuinely think this show has had a solid little run here in the back half of the season. It's just a shame that it had that lull of about 3 or 4 episodes in the middle where it really came to a grinding halt and felt like it was spinning its wheels. It felt like we didn't get a whole lot out of that middle batch. And hopefully that's something they can improve upon next season. Hopefully next season changes the things up enough that it can't possibly feel like it's spinning its wheels at any point. But To be fair, like, I like the first few episodes of the season, really liked. These last few episodes, really liked. It's just that middle chunk. And even the best of this season has not been as good as season 1. Season 1 is a phenomenal season of TV. And had that quality stayed as consistent as it could have, even though I liked a lot of season 2 and I've liked a good chunk of season 3, I think obviously it's been less consistent. This season especially has been less consistent. And because of that, since I'm comparing it to Breaking Bad, I feel like if it wanted to be in the competition with Breaking Bad, it would have to have kept as consistent as season 1. Because I think for me, Breaking Bad did. Breaking Bad is one of the best shows ever made. And I think Handmaid's Tale in season 1 I thought could be up there. These 2 seasons, though, have kind of brought it down a tier or 2, where it's a really great show. It has a lot of great things in it, but it does have these messier parts that do drag it down a little bit. But hey, that has been episode 12. We have the season finale next week. Looking forward to that. And Connor should be back to talk about the finale, assuming he watches this one and is caught up for next week. But he should be. But he is ill. He has been ill all week. He's starting to record 1 or 2 things here or there, but it's having to be very limited. So, and in future, I think this will be a thing where if for some reason he can't make it, and instead of pushing things to a ridiculous late period, and this is already a little bit later than I'd like, I'll fly solo, and hopefully you still get enough interesting analysis and discussion out of me on my own for this to be worthwhile. So hopefully we had a nice chat about this. So yeah, let me know what you think of Handmaid's Tale episode 12 in the comments below. Like and subscribe, all that stuff. You can get us on the Twitters at mailed_fuzz for channel updates. If you want to support the show and the channel and everything we do here, you can head over to patreon.com/mailedfuzztv, where you can support us for as little as $1 per month and get some bonuses, extras, exclusives, all that kind of thing. So you can do that. You can also rate the podcast on your podcast app, like the audio version of it. You can give us 5 stars, give us a nice review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to them. And it's worth mentioning, this is not the only podcast feed we have. Even for TV shows, we have a Netflix reviews feed. If you just search Mail Fuzz TV, or if you go to the Patreon page, there's a nice list of all the feeds. You can find all the Netflix shows we do on that feed. And there's also movie review podcasts and things like that we do as well. So if you go over to Patreon, you get a nice handy list of everything. Or on the YouTube page, of course, has all our content. So have a look. Otherwise, though, that is us. So thank you once again for watching or listening. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV, guys. Have you got any vanilla?